Okay, let's generate some basic statistics for our insurance data set. So go ahead and open that back up if you haven't already. One thing you will want to do, because we're about to create some calculations in this workbook, we want to go ahead and save it. So we'll do a file, save as, and right now it's a CSV. We'll just change it to an Excel workbook so that any formulas that we add to our workbook will continue to be there the next time we work with it. So we're now in an Excel version of this insurance data set. So what we want to do is we want to calculate the missing values. So number of missing. And then we would want to also convert that into percent. So percent missing. How many unique, number of unique values. And then we want to get a feel for the actual range of values. So we want our minimum value, our median value, and our maximum value. And then we want the value at 1/4 of the records and at 3/4 of the records. So quartile 1, quartile 3. All right. So let's go ahead and just copy all of our attribute names over there to the right. Now, this works nicely if you've got a narrow data set like we do here. If you've got a bigger data set, you may want to just set up a separate tab where you create these calculations. And the calculations will work the same. So, number of missing, well, we'll just use one of our functions in Excel. It's called count blank. So equals count blank. And I want that for my age. So A2 all the way down to the bottom. And I press enter. And right now you can see this is a pretty clean data set. So I don't have any, but I can test it out by deleting a couple. Okay, yeah, it looks like it's working. And then undo that so I get them back. All right, so percent missing. Well, we'll just do that same equals count blank for my age, close the parentheses, and then divide this by just plain old count. Count of the same column of data. So I want A2 down to A1339 one more time. And then I could close the parentheses, press enter, and you can see right now I've got nothing. Let's say I go ahead and delete 2 again. All right, so it does change. My count changes, my percent missing. I'm going to go ahead and Control Z there again. Try it again with a few. Yeah, so it seems to be working fine. What I would like to do with the percent missing is go ahead and make that a percentage. And probably give it a couple decimal points just in case. All right, so the next one is how many unique values do we have? So this one, we're going to take advantage of one of Excel's functions called, as you might imagine, unique. So I'm going to do an equals unique. And here, let's first see what happens if I select the whole column. So what happens is it gives me a range of all of the unique values in that column of data. Okay, so you can see it's far fewer than the 1,300 some odd records we have. But what is that count? Well, let's modify this function or this formula. So let's do count of whatever unique returns. And now I see I have 47. So let's take a look at that again. So I've got count as my function. And then within that function, what I'm counting is I'm going to count another function, the unique function for my range of data. All right. Let's see what comes next. Min. So that's a pretty straightforward, equals min. And my range of values. And my minimum value is 18. Max, pretty much the same approach for maximum. Okay, 64. Median equals median of that same range. 39. So now let's calculate our quartiles. And as you might imagine, Excel has a function for that. Let's calculate quartile 1, and we'll do that by typing in equals quartile. And you'll see a couple options show up. I'm not going to focus on that third one that you see there because that little warning sign tells me that Excel is going to deprecate that function at some point in the future. So let's go ahead and not bother with that. Now, quartile exclusive and inclusive basically give me two approaches. The inclusive means it's going to give me one of the numbers that's in my range. So it's going to give me a data value that is in my data set. Exclusive means it may calculate one for me that doesn't actually happen to be in my data set. So let's go ahead and use inclusive. And the array we'll select is our age again. Close my parentheses, comma, and then we want quartile 1. And I messed it up. So instead of closing the parentheses there, I want to close it after the 1. Okay, so that works a little bit better. So you can see I did quartile.inc, and then within my parentheses, the first parameter is A2 through A1339, comma. Second parameter is which quartile do I want? I want the first quartile. Now, if I were to change this to the second quartile, you'll see I end up with the same thing I get as a median. All right. So I'm going to do change that back to quartile 1, and then we'll do quartile 3 down here equals quartile inclusive. Select my big range, comma, and then choose third quartile. All right, 51 is my value for the third quartile. All right, so now I've got a basic set of descriptives for my age attribute. All right, so let's copy these over and see what happens. Okay, so I now have BMI. Looks like that worked okay. Children, charges. All right, so it looks like we're okay there. I may want to do some formatting with my charges, for example, so that I limit them to 2 decimal places. There we go. And maybe same thing with body mass. All right. Now look what happened to my text fields. My number, my count worked fine, but my missing did not work fine. Let's take a look, count blank. So when you have text data, instead of count, let's try count A. So that's the count, basically a count of cells that aren't empty. And now that works for me. I can also say, let's get rid of these three. Okay, so it seems to be working okay. I will undo that. All right, so now I can use that for all of my textual fields and fix that. Again, you can see we don't have any missing data. It's a pretty clean data set. What about unique? Well, again, we're using the count function here. So let's change that to a count A. And now we can see we have 2 unique genders, 2 values for smoking, and 4 for region. And then min for a textual field like that, it's basically just going to give us alphabetical order. We don't really care about that, so I'm just going to do an NA for all those. And then I'll copy those over to my other 2 text fields. And with that, I have gotten myself a good set of descriptives, quick descriptives for my data. Now, there's another way you can do that. If you have the data analysis add-in installed, then I can go to that and say, well, give me some descriptive statistics. I click OK. So first it asks me, well, which range of data do you want to describe? So I will do that. Labels in my first row, and I can tell it to put the output. Oh, I don't want to put it in a new worksheet. I want to put it in a specific point in my workbook. So let's put it over to the right of what we've just been doing. And then I'll just say, give me some summary statistics. And let's say I wanted to calculate my quartiles. I can do a kth largest and a kth smallest, but this requires me to count up the number of records I have and then do the appropriate calculation. So let's see what that is. What do we have? 1338. So 1338. So if we take times 1/4 and then times 3/4 and then just multiply. So here we've got 334 and 1003, let's say. So now let's do our descriptives. So data analysis, descriptive statistics. All right, so it keeps what I've got. And now it's just going, okay, my kth largest will be 1003. And my kth smallest will be 335. All right. So now I click OK. And you can see I get a set of descriptives here, including my mean, median, mode. So those are the 3 types of averages that we could have. Standard error, standard deviation, sample variance. We also have kurtosis and skewness for that field, which will come in handy going forward. For now, we're not using them. And then I have range, which basically tells me how many values between my lowest and highest value. And then my minimum, maximum, sum, count, largest and smallest. I'm not getting what I expect there. I got the 27 for Q1, the calculated Q1. I would have expected some 51 or something close to that for the 1003rd records, so that might be something to look into for the univariate stats. In the meantime, that is an alternate way to generate some of the stats that we'll want, especially kurtosis and skewness that we'll see going forward. But in the meantime, this approach here works fine, and you can see we have the 47 unique values, so that it does not show up in the descriptive stats. Neither does the number of missing records or percent. So other than that, you've got a lot of the same types of information in your descriptives. So you can use those as a starting point as well. From there, I would start recording these into my data understanding document or report. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so we just calculated number of missing, percent missing, number unique. So we can say number missing, percent missing, number unique, min, Q1, median, Q3, and max. And at this point, it might not be a bad idea to add a little break and make this page landscape. So I can do that by going to my Layout tab in Word and going to Breaks, and I'm going to add a section break that takes me to the next page. So once I've done that, I can now go to Layout and change this from Portrait to Landscape. And you can see what happens is I now have my portrait page and a landscape page here that I can now start adding some more columns to. So I'm going to go to my table layout here, and I would like to add a couple more columns over to the right. So I'll do that. All right. So now I've got my max that I can enter. So I can work my way down, and basically I'm just going to transpose as I go. So 0, 0%, 47, 18, 27, and then 39, 51, 64. All right. And I can do a little bit of alignment here. Probably better to right align my numbers. All right, and I also know that I have 0 missing for all of my attributes, so that saves me a little bit of time there. So now I'm going to go to 2 for my number of unique values. And again, for my text fields, my min, max are not important, so I'm going to do an NA for those. And that goes down to smoker and region. Okay. All right, so let's go to BMI. 548 unique values. Min is 15.96. Q1, 26.30. Q2, 30.40. Q3, 34.69. And max, 53.15. Go back to children. I've got 6 unique values. Wouldn't expect a ton of different values there. 0 and 0 for my min and Q1. Median is 1, then Q3 is 2, and max is 5. And then let's finish our uniques for smoker 2. Region 4, charges 1337. And then for charges, minimum charge 1121.87. Q1 4740.29. $93.82.03. 16. 639.91, and then 63. 770.43. All right, so we've started, we've done a little bit more documentation for our attributes, and let's go ahead and stop this video now and keep moving on.